Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in tonight. My name is Matthew, and I'm the Adult Services Coordinator here at the library. Whether you're joining us online or in person, we are so grateful that you're sharing your evening with us here at the library. If there's ever anything we can do to help resource you, just let us know and we want to do that. Tonight, we have a very exciting program for you, the Paramount Theater Then and Now. And we have a special guest from the Paramount Theater. His name is Joel Friend. He is a graduate of Duke University, the Eugene O'Neill Theater in Waterford, Connecticut, and the Second City Training Center in Chicago. He's worked at the Paramount since 2017, and he currently works with the fundraising team for the nonprofit Paramount Theater with the focus on corporate giving and sponsorship. He lives in Montgomery with his wife, Julie, and his 3 children after living in Chicago for 20 years. His favorite Broadway shows are a tie between Once and Kinky Boots, but he says that he's seen Jesus Christ Superstar and Fiddler on the Roof at least 6 times each. That's a pretty good record right there. Yeah. So we are so excited to hear from Joel just in a few minutes, and thanks for sharing your evening with us. If you're joining us online, at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A button and a chat button. After Joel shares, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So at any point, if you have a question, feel free to drop your question there in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as we have time for. And if you're here in person, if you have some paper and a pen, you can feel free to write down a question on that slip of paper, and then we'll come by and get it before the Q&A and make sure that we get those answered as well. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Joel, thank you for coming to us through the internet tonight. Thanks for being here with us on Zoom. We so look forward to hearing from you.
All right, thanks. And I just want to say I love questions. So the questions are probably going to be more interesting than anything I have to say. So keep those questions coming. Matt, thank you for the great introduction. I do have to correct you. It's Drake University. I went to but that's okay. No problem. But yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to throw some pretty pictures up on the screen for everybody here. And Matt, please interrupt anytime if it seems that something's not working or if I'm going over my time or anything like that. All righty. Hopefully this is working, and hopefully you guys all see a beautiful picture of the Paramount Theater. So as Matt said, my name is Joel Friend. I work with the fundraising team here at the Paramount Theater, and I have a particular focus with corporate giving and sponsorship, but I've been a fan of theater my entire life. My journey into the theater world probably started in 3rd grade when I went on a school field trip. Mrs. Miller was the teacher who took us on a field trip, and I was absolutely flabbergasted at the live theater that I saw. And I thought, this is awesome. People can be part of this and do this and work in theaters and everything else. So before I was at the Paramount Theater, I worked at the Lyric Opera in downtown Chicago. I was there for between 7 and 8 years. Absolutely loved that. Before I was at the Lyric Opera, I worked at the Metropolis Performing Arts Center in Arlington Heights, Illinois. That's about a 350-seat theater. Loved my experience there. Paramount's been on my radar for a long time for the great work that I knew that they were doing in the Chicago suburbs. And when the opportunity came to work at the theater, I said to my wife, I said, if we get this job, we're moving out to the suburbs. We're going to do that cliched thing and moving out of the city and moving into the suburbs. And that's exactly what we did. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. Had a little bit of a hiatus in 2020. In March of 2020, because of COVID-19, we were forced to shut down. We originally thought that we were shutting down for only about 2 or 3 weeks, and it turned out that we shut down for 524 days. But I am happy to say that we are back. We are currently doing our production of Groundhog Day, which is the 3rd Broadway show that we've opened since the COVID-19 pandemic, which I am extremely proud of. And I have enjoyed the time that I've been back. I was furloughed for almost exactly a year, as was about 90% of the Paramount staff. But we are back, we are open, and we're doing everything we can to bring great theater to the Fox Valley area. but also keep everyone safe as well. So anyway, here is the Paramount Theater located in downtown Aurora. Here it is by day, and here it is by night. I count myself as very lucky to have the opportunity to work with the Paramount, because it's had such a great history. Aurora has a wonderful history as well, and I get to look at the theater every day that I come to work, and so I feel very lucky about that. Of course, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this man right here. His name is Jules J. Rubens, who went by J.J. Rubens. J.J. Rubens in 1915, he formed the Aurora Theater Company. He and some other kind of forward-thinking theater executives and investors were looking at investing in theater, and they formed the Aurora Theater Company. It was a group that kind of guided the Aurora movie business. Now, the thing is that right now, Paramount is probably the biggest and the most well-known theater in Aurora. There's a couple of other live theaters here in Aurora. When the Paramount came to be, which was a few years after 1915, there were numerous theaters in Aurora that were doing vaudeville and silent films. Some of the theaters that were in Aurora around the time that the Aurora Theater Company formed was the B, just the letter B, the Iowa, the Fox, the Dreamland, the Lyric, the Majestic, the Orpheum, the Palace, and the Princess. These were all theaters that were known for doing vaudeville shows and silent movies. So Aurora really was a place that was well known for the number of theaters that they had, and the number of performances, whether vaudeville or silent films or whatever, that were occurring. So a few years after JJ and his contacts formed the Aurora Theater Company, Paramount Pictures, which was involved in film, began to construct theaters all over the United States so they could show their films. We've all heard of Paramount Pictures. Some of us even have Paramount Plus on our streaming devices. That was a big company in the 20s that was producing more films, and they wanted to have theaters built that would specifically be there to show their films. And of course, at the time, they weren't called films, they were talkies, because we had moved as a society from silent films to this new medium of films that were talkies. So JJ was obviously had his finger on the pulse of what was happening in the world. Paramount Pictures, which was separate than JJ at the time, was expecting big theaters were going to be built all over these large theaters across the country to bring more entertainment and more theater, and of course more ticket sales to the people. So before the Paramount Theater came to be, I'm going to go back a little bit before the Paramount Theater was built. Like I said, the Paramount Theater is located in downtown Aurora. On that very spot, on Galena, which used to be Main Street, which is now Galena Boulevard, there used to be the Sylvandale Dance Hall. Now, the Sylvandale was built in 1915, which just so happens to be the year that my grandma was born. And after it was open for a few years, J.J. Rubens and some of his partners converted the Sylvandale Theater to another theater called the Rialto. That happened in 1919. Now, before I get to the Rialto Theater, I just want to point out a few things on here, because as I show more and more pictures, these things will pop up more and more. So notice, first of all, this dome and this flagpole on the top of the Sylvandale. Notice this bridge. Like I said, this was Main Street at the time in downtown Aurora. Notice that really cool classic car there, so you know that this was a while ago. Here's the Fox River, of course, and the bridge over the Fox River. And over here, from our perspective, we would say it was behind the Sylvandale Dance Hall. This is Downer Street now. It was Fox Street, named after the Fox River. And notice this little structure back here as well. That was part of the Sylvandale Dance Hall, but also it was officially the Fox Theater I mentioned all the theaters that were in the area. The Fox was one of them. Fox Theater opened in 1910. And then in about 1915 to 1919, it was kind of became part of the Sylvandale and then the Rialto. And actually still to this day, you can walk in the front door at the Paramount Theater, which we'll get to in a little bit, and through a series of tunnels and everything underneath the buildings, I can exit the building on Downer, which used to be Fox, which is pretty cool that they were thinking about that. So as I mentioned, the Sylvandale was converted in 1919 to the Rialto Theater, which I think is very interesting because as we all know now, in modern 21st century, there's the great Rialto Theater in Joliet. Not really sure how that came to be, and I'm not going to talk about that because you're here to hear about the Paramount, but here's the Rialto. And notice that dome and the flagpole that I talked about earlier. So you can see that some elements from the Sylvandale Dance Hall still existed. But here we are on Galena Boulevard, which was Main Street at the time. Now the Rialto Theater boasted 2,250 seats. It had a pipe organ. There was also a bowling alley in the basement, and there were some offices and various things in the Rialto Theater. Here's a picture of the interior of the Rialto. I'm assuming that these are the front doors going out to Main Street or Galena, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm not really sure about the orientation of where we're looking at everything, because unfortunately in 1928, there was a devastating fire that destroyed the Rialto Theater. And you can see I found a little bit of a clip from, or I shouldn't say a clip, an article that made it all the way to the LA Times. The fire happened in October of 1928. And it was known as the $1 Million Fire. It was known as that because of the money that J.J. Rubens and his partners had put into the Rialto to convert it from the Sylvandale Dance Hall to the Rialto Theater. I'm a little confused about the perspective of this picture too, because there's so much debris and devastation in the foreground of the photo, but we can still see that dome that I asked you to pay attention to right here. I hope you guys can see that when I'm pointing to it. And there's also the little bit of the flagpole right there. And if I'm wrong, feel free to interrupt and let me know. There also, that if you remember, I mentioned the Fox Theater. The Fox Theater was damaged, but it was not destroyed in the fire. Later on, the Fox Theater was closed down, and then it was condemned by the city. But that was after the Paramount Theater opened up. And actually now on Downer Street, where the Fox Theater used to stand, is the costume shop for the Paramount Theater. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So there was a need in downtown Aurora to rebuild the Rialto Theater. And so in stepped the Aurora Theater Company and J.J. Rubens and his partners. So J.J. Rubens took a trip to Italy in the late 20s or early 30s and was inspired by the architecture and the theaters that were in Italy. And when he came back to the United States, he was inspired to take the Art Deco architecture theme that was sort of the rage in the United States, but also combine it with the Italian theaters that he had seen. So he had a vision that where the Rialto stood, there would be a new theater, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and he would call it the Venetian Theater. Now, I just so happen to have some pictures of the Venetian Theater right here. You can definitely see on those two murals there, there's definitely a water theme. You can tell there's a gondola, there's some fireworks, there's a man and a woman there looking very fancy, looking over the water, very much a theme of the canals of Venice and everything else. Now, some of you might be looking at this picture and thinking, wait a minute, the Venetian Theater, I've been inside the Paramount. There's murals exactly like that at the Paramount Theater. And you're exactly right. That's because in 1930, the Aurora Theater Company was purchased by the Paramount famous Lasky Corporation. And thus the Venetian Theater at almost the 11th hour became the Paramount Theater. And so a lot of the architecture and the mural designs and the themes and everything else stayed in place, but the name changed from the Venetian to the Paramount Theater. So the theater opened in September of 1931, right here in downtown Aurora. This is one of the posters that was supposedly hung up around town. You'll see it says Thursday at 6 o'clock, the Paramount will open. Some of the brilliant events were some flag exercises, a bugle corps, a fireworks display on the riverfront, and at 7 p.m. In September of 1931, September 3rd to be exact, they were going to do their first show. But then if you can see at the bottom, it says the second complete performance will also occur at 9 p.m. So if you missed the 7, you still had a chance to see it at 9 o'clock. Now, according to some information that I found, a bunch of stars from the Paramount Pictures, a lot of the stars that were making Paramount Pictures, were here for the event. I'm not 100% sure if this is true or not, but it makes a great urban legend. So supposedly some of the stars that came to the Paramount opening back in September of 1931 were the Marx Brothers, Jack Benny, and even Burns and Allen. So if that's true, that's pretty awesome. I do know that George Burns was here later, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here is a ticket that you would have purchased for the inaugural performance on Thursday, September 3rd, 1931 at the Paramount Theater. This particular ticket was good only for the 7 o'clock show. And also, if you see on the bottom right-hand side, it says, if you present the ticket at the door, it'll be returned to you as a Paramount souvenir. So it's pretty cool that we have a picture. It would be even cooler if there's somebody out there who actually has a ticket stub from when they came to check us out in 1931. Also notice on the bottom left-hand side, it says the price was 50 cents, 50 cents to see a show. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. So I took the time to look up the prices of some other things in the 30s when the Paramount Theater opened. A new car would cost you $640. A new house would cost you a little under $6,800. But if you needed to rent, you could expect your rent to be about $18 a month. Gas was 10 cents. A movie was 35 cents. So you were to pay it a little bit more to see a live performance at the Paramount Theater. If you wanted to send something through the post office, that was 2 cents. If you needed a loaf of bread, that was 8 cents. A gallon of milk was 26 cents. And the average salary was $1,850. So things have definitely changed a little bit since the theater opened in 1931. Interesting factoid as well, 1931 was kind of a banner year, not just for Paramount and the city of Aurora, but that's also when the Star-Spangled Banner was decided to be our national anthem. Believe it or not, prior to 1931, there was no national anthem. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That two great things happened in 1931. An interesting fact too about the Paramount Theater is outside of the city of Chicago, the Paramount Theater was the first building in the state of Illinois, outside of the city of Chicago, to have air conditioning. Very important thing. I mentioned that fact to my kids this morning, and they didn't think it was such a big deal since they've been used to air conditioning their entire life. But I said, oh, I guarantee you in the Northern Illinois summers, an opportunity to spend a few cents to see a show, whether it be vaudeville or a talkie or a silent film, to sit in the air conditioning, it probably would have been worth it. And keep in mind, since this opened in 1931, the Great Depression started in late 1929. Excuse me, I opened in 1931. I think I said 1931. Great Depression started in 1929. So theaters like the Paramount, and there were a lot of theaters that were being built, they would be a great escape from the reality of the Great Depression. In fact, I know that Paramount Pictures, that was building theaters all over the country, they had intended to build even more and more, but the Great Depression basically ended those plans. So here is the Paramount Theater. I'm assuming right after it opened. The interesting thing about the Paramount is it's changed a lot, of course, as everything has since 1931. But here we are again along Galena Boulevard. But what I think is really interesting is right next to the theater, this is the theater entrance right there. You can see the great Paramount marquee, the entrance to the theater, the original entrance. But there's a park that was located there, and that was called Paramount Park. And Paramount Park, from what I can tell, was open from when the theater opened in 1931 till about 1934, and included, as you can see in the picture, some paths, some ponds, a garden. But I also found out some of the research that there was some mini golf there as well. And the interesting thing about Paramount Park is it was only for the patrons of the Paramount Theater. It was not a public park. So perhaps if there was, if you were seeing a couple of shows that day, in between shows, you could take some well-deserved a break or respite in the Paramount Park. I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but I wanted to include this because if you've been in the Paramount Theater lately, you'll notice that it looks very similar to the Paramount Theater. Now, it's mentioned down in the lower right-hand corner that it was built by the famous architect Rapp and Rapp Architects. I was hoping that that would indicate a date. It hasn't, but I'm going to assume that this picture was old for a couple of reasons. First of all, the back of the theater looks a little bit different now. The doors are the same, but some of the architecture and some of the features in the back along the balcony and the very back wall look a little bit different. Also, the photos in black and white. And finally, look at that really interesting, great, even retro pattern on the seats there, the upholstered seats. So if you were to come into the Paramount Theater in the 30s, the 40s, maybe even the 50s, definitely the 50s, all the way up until almost the turn of the century, this is the view that you would have seen when you walked into the theater. This is the original lobby. Notice that great chandelier hanging from the top, the mirrored ceilings, the great stairway and carpeting going up to your balcony seats, that really awesome pattern on the floor. And then the door to the theater right there in the back, straight back with some light kind of shining through it. I just think that's a great room. We still have that room. I'm going to get to some pictures of it later. I just think it's so neat that this theater is still standing, and that from when you walk into the original lobby to when you're sitting in your seat, a lot of the features and the architecture is exactly what you would have seen if you came to see that the theater, if you would have come to see a show at the theater decades ago, literally decades ago. I just think that that's such a cool thing. And again, I just feel so lucky to be able to work here, and I can see that almost every day if I wanted to. So not only was the theater doing live shows, but I mentioned, of course, they're doing films and talkies. You'll see the great marquee there. That film, Together Again with James Dunn and Sally Eilers, that was released in November of 1931. So that would have been one of the first shows that you would have seen at the Paramount as a live theater performance. I love how there's a cable car going down Main Street, now Galena Avenue. How everyone's dressed up in their Sunday best just to see a movie. Here's another view from the Paramount. You can see a little bit of the bridge here, and the Fox River is just down below. If you were to jump over that railing down in the lower left-hand corner, you would see that you would land in the river. Notice the marquee, because that will change over the years. It has 4 sides on it. This marquee right now is advertising monkey business with the Marx Brothers. That was also released in 1931. Remember, the Marx Brothers were supposedly here when the theater opened, which, you know, I think is believable in the fact that they would have wanted a lot of people to see their shows. The Paramount Theater would have been one of the few places that you could see a Paramount picture, especially in the area. So they would have loved to have seen big crowds at the Paramount, and they would have loved to welcome them in. And on the lower right-hand corner of that picture, you can see that great car there. It's so great to see these vintage automobiles. So what could you see at the Paramount Theater? Well, I mentioned you could see vaudeville, you could see a silent film, you could see a talkie. I also found out there were circuses, at least one performance of Rigoletto, which is an opera. Me being somewhat of an opera fan from my days at the Lyric Opera, happy to hear that there was at least one opera performed on stage. But also Sally Rand was here. This is a newspaper article I found. It would be circa 1936. Sally Rand was a burlesque dancer. She did the bubble dance and the fan dance, where she would have appeared nude on stage, and she would have had fans and bubbles to cover up the bits and pieces that she wouldn't have been allowed to show. I'm sure that a lot of gentlemen back in the day would have been interested in seeing the show, but I'm sure they never came. Yes, Sally Rand performed on our stage, which is pretty cool, as well as all the other performances that you could have seen. So I think the moral of the story here is there were a lot of great acts that you could have seen on our stage, whether Sally Rand was was your cup of tea or not. But of course, the theater's been standing here since longer than just the 30s. A lot of these pictures are focusing on right when it opened. I was able to find this picture. This picture was taken in, I'm guessing, 1972. The reason is that the Paramount marquee, which already has seen a change, as I mentioned, is advertising The Godfather. The Godfather was released in 1972, and I have no reason to think that it would have been much beyond 1972 that this photograph was taken. Some things have definitely changed since 1972. Here we are in 2022, and celebrating, I guess, an anniversary of The Godfather. But across the street from the Paramount Theater are all these stores and downtown businesses. Of course, it would have been booming at the time. And right now, this is where the North Island Center is located. That's where a lot of the administrative offices are for the Paramount Theater. That's actually right where I'm sitting right now. So all of these buildings are no longer there. Happy to say there's still some street parking though, so you can see those cars enjoying their street parking. But a lot of these things were gone. So that was, like I said, probably around 1972 when this picture was taken. So you can already see quite a change from the Paramount Theater of the 30s and 3 or 4 decades there. The big one being that the marquee looks like it was 4-sided at one time, and then changed to a 3-sided marquee. And also, if you notice the big horizontal Paramount that was hanging on the side of the building, advertising Paramount, up and down, definitely catching your eye as you'd be walking by or driving by with one of those great automobiles. That's missing from this photograph. So my guess is they took that down to change the marquee, and sometime after that it went back up, but somebody got this photograph. So just before this photo would have been taken in the early 70s, in 1965, something sort of significant happened. And at the time, nobody may have paid any attention to it, but it really kind of changed the path of the Paramount Theater and also of downtown Aurora. And in 1965, the Aurora Civic Center Authority and the Aurora Redevelopment Commission were established. And these were organizations that were specifically set up by state and local government to help redevelop the downtown, to give financial resources to the redevelopment of the downtown. And in 1975 or 76, the Aurora Civic Center Authority, which is still something that's in place today, purchased the Paramount Theater. And then, kind of interestingly, is they immediately shut it down. The reason being is that surprisingly, miraculously, luckily, whatever adjective we want to ascribe to the situation, the Paramount actually never had a significant shutdown between the time when it opened in 1931 to when the Aurora Civic Center Authority purchased the building in 1976. But they decided it was in need of renovation after being open for decades and decades and decades. So after the Aurora Civic Center Authority purchased the Paramount, they shut it down and began about a $3 million renovation that ended up lasting 2 years. I'm not sure exactly when the date was that it shut in 76, but it reopened in April of 1978. And at the time when they were working on the renovation, this is some of the information that I found. They restored the interior decor to its former grandeur, and working from black and white photographs from some of the originals in 1931. They were able to gut the interior and try to build it back to where it was in 1931. So those murals that I pointed out to you earlier, there's actually 8 murals total, 4 on each side of the theater. They were all hand painted on the wall, but they were in very poor shape after decades, and they had to be replaced. So each mural was traced and repainted on flame retardant silk-like fabric, and was hung up in the original position. The seats were all reupholstered. So I'm not sure of those pictures that I showed you earlier, if that was after the reupholstering or before. Obviously, everything was kind of repainted and plaster areas were built up again. Some of the panels on the side were covered in gold leaf, and they had to replicate the look on that. Now, the ceiling of the Paramount, let me go back to one of the pictures of the Paramount. I got a color one there. The ceiling of the Paramount, they had to restore that as well. But they found out that actually it wasn't as bad a shape as they thought it was. It was just very, very dirty. 20% of the ceiling was needed to be repainted. The other 80% just needed to be cleaned. I'm guessing part of that may have been old lights, being able to smoke indoors, and just the general soot and stuff that would have been in the air in the early century. But I just thought it was interesting that they thought, oh boy, the ceiling's gonna have to be completely repaired and replaced. And then it turned out it just needed a good thing of elbow grease. So here are some of the things that I talked about that were redone. I think this picture gives you a really good sense on some of the architectural features of the Paramount. At the bottom is some of the murals that I discussed. Again, those aren't the original murals, but they're copied from the original murals. You see the beautiful paint job that was done up above. You can see that too, there's some lighting and stuff like that. That would have been very, very modern. But the curves and the architecture of the theater kind of lends itself to that sort of Venetian theme that J.J. Rubens was going for back in when the Paramount was being built in the early 30s. So the Aurora Civic Center Authority, which purchased the theater in 1976 and reopened it in 78, their purpose is to kind of promote, and they're still around, they promote, they operate, and they maintain the activities, the cultural activities, the social activities and things that happen in the city, and in regards to the Paramount Arts Center. And we're thankful for the work that they still do for us. So like I said, it seemed kind of insignificant that there was this body that was created in 1965, but here we are in 2022, and they're still around and still contributing to the Paramount and to the city of Aurora. So we're back at 1978 now. A couple of significant things have happened since the theater opened. In 1981 was the Paramount's 50th anniversary. To celebrate that, they had a gala event. And if you remember Red Skelton, the performer Red Skelton, he appeared at the gala. In 1991 was the 60th anniversary of the Paramount Theater. So there was another gala that happened, and George Burns was the MC for that gala. So George Burns has been to the theater. Now, was he here 60 years previous in 1931? I think he probably was, but all I can find is just a couple of mentions online, but no reason to think that they're not true. But I do know that George Burns was here for the 60th anniversary back in 1991. At the time, he was probably 207 years old. Another significant thing that happened in downtown Aurora would have been the casino, the Hollywood Casino, which we are probably all aware of. That opened in 1993. So then the theater was 62 years young. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. A couple of things I forgot to mention that definitely had an impact on downtown. So in 1975 is when the Fox Valley Mall opened. Okay, 1975, the Fox Valley Mall. Then 1976 is when the theater shut down for that 2-year renovation. And then in 1982, Carson Peary Scott was the last department store that was open in downtown Aurora, and that shut down, no doubt because of the Fox Valley Mall being built. And so from 1982 on, there wasn't a lot going on downtown. The Paramount Theater was running, but not doing nearly as many shows as they used to do. It would be 10 years before the casino would open. And of course, seeing movies, seeing films in a converted theater was really out of fashion. There was a point, I would say probably in the late 70s, early 80s, when theaters were being specifically built to show movies. And I would bet that Star Wars coming out in 1977 probably had an impact on that. Better sound, better acoustics, better things to sort of lend themselves to the cinematic experience. And so a lot of theaters ended up suffering from the fact that there weren't audiences coming in even to see films, to see the talkies, which were 50 years of talkies at this point. And so a lot of theaters kind of went into decline. Paramount wasn't immune to that, but luckily stayed open and was able to make some significant impact with that renovations that occurred in the late 70s. So now we're going to fast forward to 2006. That would be the 75th anniversary of the Paramount Theater. And a big significant change was made to the Paramount, and that was the Grand Gallery was added on to the building. The Grand Gallery is the lobby that you probably are familiar with now. Now the theater is starting to look more and more like the Paramount Theater that everyone is used to. So here's the Grand Gallery, which was added on in 2006. And where was the Grand Gallery put? Well, it was put in the same location as that Paramount Park, if you remember that picture that I showed you earlier. So when you set foot into the Grand Gallery at the Paramount, you are stepping where the Paramount Park used to be. In fact, on this picture here, you can see the brickwork in the back of the Grand Gallery. That used to be the exterior of the Paramount Theater. And I'm going to switch back to the park for just a second. So here's the brickwork. You can kind of see the arches, depending on how closely you're looking at the screen. But there's the brickwork. That's the back wall of the Grand Gallery. Here, of course, is the Paramount Park again. And boom, here we are in modern day Paramount. So this was really key because not only were we able to utilize some space that had probably been underused, we were also able to add a lot of modern amenities that modern theater audiences are used to. For example, we were able to add a bigger box office that's over on the left-hand side, a coat room, which is in the rear of the left-hand side. We also have a full bar now. Audiences are more used to getting some bars and things in their theater experience. So we added that on there. Also some more restrooms, and of course, an important elevator to get up to the balcony. Prior to 2006, which is hard to believe, it was if you would have had a seat in the balcony, you would have had to take stairs. So it's not very ADA friendly. So now we're able to accommodate our guests that maybe have some mobility issues. Like I said, the restrooms are a very important thing to add as well, because previous to that, the only restrooms that were in the building were downstairs. So if stairs were not your friend, then the Paramount Theater may not have been exactly the place for you to be. 20 years prior to 2006, when the Grand Gallery opened, in 1986, the Paramount Theater was added on to the National Registry of Historic Places, which I think is really cool because now the Paramount Theater has even more of a reason to stick around. It's not going to get raised so a shoe store can be built. It's an important, significant piece of American history and, of course, the regional history. So now that we're kind of looking at pictures and thinking memories of the Paramount that we're more used to, just some sort of side-by-side pictures. Here's the original lobby. I'm not going to say this original lobby is now, because this bar that's right here has changed significantly over the past few years. But I wanted to show this picture because it gives you a sense of that great floor. So you can see the design in the floor there on the right-hand side and the floor there on the left-hand side. Here's the interior of the theater. There's those great upholstered seats right there. And then, of course, some of the more modern seating that you might be used to. There's those murals up on the wall that I was pointing out to you earlier. So now I think the theater is kind of looking more and more kind of what you're used to seeing. But a lot of things significantly changed for the Paramount Theater in 2011. And that's when the leadership here at Paramount, which had gone through a lot of changes, decided to make a really brave decision, and that was to produce their own Broadway shows. Previous to now, the Paramount had been presenting shows, which means a show would come in on a truck, it would be loaded off the truck, it would be put on stage, it would perform for a few times, it would go back on the truck, and it would go to the next location, whether it be Rockford or Des Moines or the cities or whatever. Starting in 2011, everything that I won't say everything, but all the Broadway shows that you see on our stage are actually produced by the Paramount Theater. So the Chicago Sun-Times came out and did a big spread, said everything was suddenly lovely in Aurora because we were doing 3 weeks of shows. We're up to 7 to 10 weeks now. And the first Paramount Broadway season was My Fair Lady, Joseph, Chorus Line, and Hair. Now, not a lot of people know that everything that you see on the Paramount stage in the Broadway series is produced here in Aurora. Here is one of our costume makers producing one of the costumes that you have seen or will see on the Paramount stage. As I mentioned, on Downer Street, which is behind the Paramount Theater, used to be the Fox Theater. That building is now the costume shop. It's connected to the theater, and our costumes are made in the costume shop. Here's a picture of the costume shop. As soon as you walk in, it's not big, but they get a lot of things accomplished there. So all the costumes that you see during the shows, whether it be Beauty and the Beast, or Kinky Boots, or Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, or My Fair Lady, if you were here back in 2011, that was made right in that room right there. Our sets are built at a warehouse that's just a few miles away from the theater. We rent out a warehouse space. That's actually one of my colleagues. Her name is Jessie. She's our props mistress. You can see the space of the theater. So our sets are built there. All of the sets. Set for Joseph and Les Mis and West Side Story and our current production of Groundhog Day. They all were born right in that room. If you're trying to figure out where exactly that space is, it's at 515 Hill Avenue. It's behind this building that's labeled as a food distribution center. So right here in Aurora, the costumes are built in Aurora, and the sets are built here in Aurora. And when we cast our actors come to Aurora. They might be from Oswego or Aurora or Chicago or New York City or Los Angeles, but they're making their home in Aurora for the 3 or 4 months that they're performing and that they're rehearsing. But we do all the casting. It's not a touring group. It's not a consistent group of actors that are doing every Paramount show. You might recognize this prop from our production of Little Mermaid. That was built here in Aurora. That's Sebastian the Crab. The music that you hear during the Broadway season, that's all live music for our orchestra. And there's an orchestra pit right under the Paramount stage. You can see some steps down the right-hand side, so you can come and go from the stage if there's an entrance that you need to have where they pop up from below. But all the music is live. It's not recorded music, and it's done by local musicians. I like this picture because all of our sets that appear on our Paramount stage, they have a design process. So this is a model of the set for Little Mermaid. And the actors get to see that before the set is built. The director uses that set model as a kind of talk about their concept and their blocking for the show. There's the boat. So that's life-size boat there. You can see some wires running out of it because it was powered by car batteries, so it could run across the stage to look like they were rowing during the Kiss the Girl scene in Little Mermaid. And this is just one of the great productions that's been on our stage, Broadway caliber theater that's occurring right here in Aurora. Hopefully you got to see Little Mermaid because it was spectacular. Not only do the audiences love our shows, but so do the critics. And in fact, we are award-winning theater. The Joseph Jefferson Awards are the Chicagoland version of the Tony Awards in New York. And you can see that we've done quite well with our nominations and our wins. And every year we're nominated and every year we win. We may not do a clean sweep like we've done in some years, but every single year our hard work is recognized by the people that In 2018, we replaced all of the seats in the theater. So those kind of peach coral seats were replaced by seats that were a deeper burgundy. The seats were a little bit more padded and a little wider. We lost a few seats because the audiences are a little wider than they were in 1931, but they're super comfortable. Everyone enjoys them. And looking ahead to the future, I've talked about the past and talking about the present. We have a Paramount School for the Arts. That was built on Stolp Avenue. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to speed through some of these last slides here. So not only are we producing great theater, but we might be producing some of the great artists that may appear on our stage. The Paramount School is open year-round, including camps in the summertime. They've done some virtual classes due to COVID, but they are doing in-person classes as well. And they do classes with all the visual arts. You can also performing arts as well, mostly performing arts. I said visual arts and then performing arts. You can take a class in acting, directing, dancing, choreography, or you can just do some one-on-one coaching for an instrument that you may be playing, or if you have an audition for a program, for a theater program that you want to go into. There are classes for all ages. We like to start our artists nice and young. We have some really great spaces to learn your dance and choreography, to exercise. We have a flex studio space, so our students can get a taste of what a real theater space has to offer. We also had a pandemic project over 2020. We were shut down for the pandemic, but there was still some work being done. This was the Copley Theater, which is located directly across the street from the Paramount Theater. We did some renovations. This was the Copley Theater in like 2019. This is the Copley Theater today. We did a top to bottom $2 million renovation of the space to make it more theater friendly. And we will be producing some more shows in the Copley Theater. These are the shows that are coming up starting this month. Sweat will hit the Copley stage this month. Next week is when previews start. But in addition to the Broadway series that we'll be doing across the street at the Paramount Theater, we'll be producing some shows. We call it the Bold series. These are more dramatic pieces. They may not have a happy ending. They may or may not be musicals, but they're being done in that beautiful Copley Theater space right across the street from the theater. And it's just an opportunity for us to bring more theater to the downtown Aurora area. And like I said, looking to the future, these are some of the things coming up on our stage. We're doing Groundhog Day from now until March 13th. We take a little break from Broadway theater and we're bringing some one-off shows to the Paramount stage. Some of these shows have been on our schedule since 2019 and they've been rescheduled and the artists have been really great about working with us. So some of the artists that you'll see hitting our stage in March. And then boom, we go right back to Broadway theater and with Rock of Ages starting on April 13th. If you're interested in tickets, there's our phone number for the theater and for the box office. I'm going to stop talking now because I have a feeling that you've been listening to me prattle on and on for a long time. There's my contact information for anyone who needs it. I'm also on LinkedIn. I welcome questions tonight and in the future. So thank you for the chance for me to show off the Paramount Theater and talk about some of the rich history that we have. Obviously, Matt, you'll see that I could have spent another 15 minutes talking about the past of the Paramount and not even gotten to the present or the future. But it has a really rich history and I'm happy to share it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Joel. That was so enjoyable and informative too. I learned a lot, even just about the downtown in Aurora that I didn't know. So that was really great. We do have a few questions.
Perfect.
And the first one's actually about you. And what did you do at the Lyric in Chicago? And can you tell us about that?
Oh, cool. Yeah. I was their group sales director. I was actually the first group sales director in the history of the Lyric Opera of Chicago, which is a very storied history as well. Basically, that meant that any group that was coming in, whether it was a school group or an out-of-town bus group or a corporate group or anything like that, I worked with them on their tickets. And I started at the Lyric and I didn't know anything about opera. And that was something that came up several times in my interviews. And I was like, look, I don't know a lot about opera, but I'm willing to learn because I just love the performing arts. And my wife and I went to see a show there and we were hooked. We still go to the Lyric Opera. They do wonderful stuff. But yeah, I was lucky enough that I could be involved with the sales and marketing team at the Lyric, and I was able to learn some skills that were able to help me land another great job at the Paramount. So I loved everything I did at the Lyric. And if you can't see opera in downtown Aurora, definitely go see opera in downtown.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And then about the Paramount Now today, do you know what is a typical budget for a show? What does it cost to put a show on?
Yeah, there's not a typical budget, and I'll tell you why. Different shows have different needs as far as sets, as far as chorus, as far as the number of actors that you see on stage. If it's a high dance number, you need to hire more dancers, and also the size of the orchestra can change by half a dozen or more. I do know that our budgets for the shows are typically in the millions.
Yeah.
Because we do 7 to 10 week runs of the show. We have to pay for the rights for the show. We have to pay everyone who's involved. And for every person that you see on stage, I can guarantee you there's at least one person or 3/4 of a person off stage or backstage that you don't see. For example, for our production of Kinky Boots, for anyone who saw Kinky Boots, one of the main characters is Lola. Well, Lola wears all these fantastic costumes and wigs. And Lola is wearing a different outfit in every single scene. But because Lola is one of the leads, she's on stage almost all the time. And so at certain points, Lola had 3 people backstage helping with the costume and wig changes. So there's a lot going on. The sets that are flying in and out, of course, the music is being played underneath. So yeah, and because we pride ourselves on the high production values, and we want you to look at our stage and think, golly, I could be in downtown Chicago, or dare I say it, I could be in downtown New York City on Broadway seeing a show right now. It's that good. We don't do anything half-assed. We don't pull any punches as far as cost. And so yeah, the budgets can definitely be in the millions. But there's no typical one, just because it depends on on so many factors.
Yeah. And then a follow-up, is that cost then recouped totally in ticket sales, or how is the Paramount funded? I know that's some of what you do, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who are highly invested in the Paramount, and so it'd be interesting to hear about the various income streams today.
Yeah, absolutely. In United States theater, American theater, tickets usually only cover about half of a theater's operating costs. And in Europe, the governments in Europe, they fund their arts at much more of a degree than in the United States. And so we rely on ticket sales, of course. But ticket sales can only offer so much, because think about this: if you buy a ticket for Kinky Boots, you're paying for Kinky Boots. You're not necessarily paying for the cleaning of the office spaces, the electricity, the water that's running through them, the office equipment that we need, the technology that we need. It might be covering what we think is your portion of Kinky Boots and paying the people who brought Kinky Boots to the stage, but it's not paying for everything else that you don't see behind the scenes. So we definitely rely on donations. We are a nonprofit organization, and so many of our subscribers, our season ticket holders, are also donors. And for those of you who are out there listening, thank you very much for that. Especially those who donated to us while we weren't doing anything for the 500 plus days that we were closed due to COVID-19. And for those donors who have said that they aren't ready to come back to the theater yet, but they're still supporting us financially, we thank you for that. Also, we rely a lot on the business community. We ask the business community to really invest in the Paramount, because the Paramount is an economic engine as far as downtown is concerned. We are bringing 250,000 people or more to the downtown area year after year after year when there isn't a global pandemic. These people are paying for parking. These people are buying things in the stores. These people are eating at restaurants in the Aurora area before and after the show. And it's very important. So we rely on the business community who recognize that we are bringing traffic downtown and that we are improving downtown through the arts. to also support us financially. We like to think the city of Aurora has given them opportunities and benefits for doing business in the city. And hopefully they can give back a little bit. And we do have some businesses that have been sponsoring us as well. So we definitely rely on that. And then of course, there's funding from foundations. The Dunham Foundation, for example, is a big supporter, and they support many worthwhile nonprofit organizations in the Fox Valley region. Yeah, a lot of it is donations. It's not ever going to be all ticket sales unless something changes as far as government funding goes, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Good, thank you. That's very helpful as well to have an understanding of just the size of what is the operating process for the theater. So that's fascinating. Thank you.
And there's a lot of stuff you don't see that has nothing to do with the arts. We have an HR department, we have an accounting department, we have an IT department, all those things so we can just function as a business in the 21st century. I'm on a computer right now. I have a phone. I have a couple of monitors because that's how we roll now in 2022. And all of those things are important for us to be state of the art and the technology that we can to run an effective business and entertain a 21st century audience effectively.
Last question then is, what are you most excited about that's coming up, whether it's a show or a project you're working on or anything updates at the theater? What has you most excited right now?
The thing that has me the most excited right now is the fact that there's so much stuff on the schedule. And let me explain that. A year ago at this time, I was out of work sitting at home, wondering if the Paramount Theater or River Edge Park or the Copley Theater or any of the stuff that I have given my heart and soul to was ever going to open again. Even 11 months ago, I was still wondering that as well. And so the fact that we are looking at opening in April, our 4th Broadway show since a 500+ day pandemic is nothing short of miraculous. And that's not hyperbole. It's very difficult to produce live shows. Throw a pandemic on top of that, and it's darn near impossible. So I'm excited in the fact that there's something else coming, that we're going to have a full slate of Broadway shows next season, that we're going to have concerts at River Edge Park in the summertime, that we went through with the construction that we were going to do on the Copley Theater, and we're going to have 4 shows opening there as well. That just incites and invigorates me to such a degree. Because honestly, Matt, and for those who are listening, a year ago at this time, I didn't really think it was going to happen. I really didn't. Yeah. And then suddenly things started to change and change very quickly. So we have been working harder than we ever have before because we are having the same staffing and supply chain issues that the whole world is having. And yet somehow we are doing 8 shows a week and seeing audiences at the Paramount Theater and selling tickets every single day. So I'm just excited that there's something on the horizon. Honestly, I'm excited that I had this going on tonight because it meant that there were people out there who were interested in hearing about this, who are interested in hearing about the Paramount. And those people are going to buy tickets and they're going to come. Because Matt, you didn't contact me a year ago to talk about the Paramount Theater. You know what I mean? There was no Paramount at the time. So that's what I'm excited about. We are definitely seeing light at the end of the tunnel. We need those audiences. We need those donations. But man, everything has changed so much in the past year. And I can't wait to see what March 1st of 2023 is going to bring, because we will have so much behind us and so much in front of us. I know it's a long-winded answer, but man, I'm excited. I'm passionate. And I just think about everything we've been through as a company and as a city and as a country. And if the arts are coming back, we're heading in the right direction.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing your passion for the theater and for the arts. And thanks for sharing your contact information. And thank you everyone who joined us online and in the library. We look forward to seeing you real soon.
Yes, thank you all very much for all those who tuned in, to all those who made the trip to the Sandwich Library. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you at the Paramount Theater. I can't thank you enough. Thanks.
Yes. All right. Good night, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.